Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike,
And I'm Derrick,
and you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury.
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
This episode, we're talking about Season 1 of The Lincoln Lawyer. Other than Episode 1, which we already did in the first episode, go back and listen to that if you feel the need.
All right. Well, good evening, gentlemen. Recording on a nice late Sunday, thanks to Mike having gotten the date wrong for a family party. So this is going.
Oh,
great.
let's not call people out for their.
Oh, no, it was my fault. You can call me out.
I mean, listen, it's 9:32 that we're starting to record a 7:30 recording. So I think I have to
am
call.
very sorry. I am very, very sorry. I can't explain how funny it was when we went to my aunt's house a day early, rang the doorbell, looked at the email, and realized, oh no, run, run away.
That is absolutely fantastic, and it does make this a little bit better. But anyway, so we're back to talk about the Lincoln Lawyer. So in our first episode, we discussed season 1, episode 1 of the Lincoln Lawyer, a Netflix series that's now been going on for 2 seasons, renewed for a 3rd season. For season 1, it was released. All 10 episodes were released on May 13, 2022. Let's do a very brief background for those who are not paying attention. Main character of the show is Mickey Holler, a Los Angeles defense attorney who's known as the Lincoln Lawyer because he works out of the back of his various cars, which are, of course, Lincolns. First scene of the series shows Jerry Vinson, a former prosecutor turned defense attorney, getting shot and killed in a parking garage. And the general gist of the rest of the first episode is that Jerry has left his entire practice to Mickey, who has not had very many cases in the past few years due to being addicted to painkillers after having an accident and having gone through rehab. So in our first episode, we discussed 3 sort of main issues that came up in that episode. One was substance abuse, and among other things, the duties of lawyers who have a mental condition that makes it difficult or impossible to represent clients. We discussed the issues involved in transferring a law practice certainly from one lawyer to another, even more so in transferring it from a dead lawyer to another lawyer. And then the issues involved in the murder investigation related to attorney-client privilege, specifically when the police were going through Jerry's files, now Mickey's files, as part of their investigation. And very important to relay what the ratings were in our first episode. Mike gave an amazing 3 justices on both the law and enjoyment, but he did say he would listen to more or watch more of the Lincoln Lawyer. And then, as I recall, then said, but I do watch bad stuff all the time. So that was Mike's intro to the Lincoln Lawyer. Geoff gave 5 justices on legal accuracy, 6 on enjoyment, and I gave 6 on legal accuracy and quote unquote 6 or 7 on enjoyment, which I think is a 6.5, but it's a little unclear. So now we're going to jump into, so this episode, we're actually going to talk about a good chunk of the rest of season 1. And we're going to specifically talk about the Trevor Elliott trial, including all the various issues that come up, including trial prep, voir dire, the actual trial itself, the verdict, post-trial, everything along those lines. So presumably, if you're listening, you have at least watched some aspects of season 1 of Lincoln Lawyer, but in case you have forgotten or you haven't watched it recently, we're going to be talking about the Trevor Elliott trial, which is Trevor Elliott is Jerry Vinson's client, and Mickey spends a good chunk of episode 1 trying to convince him to retain him as his lawyer. As we know, like when the practice gets transferred over, he doesn't automatically get them. Clients are able to sort of, they are able to choose who their lawyers are. And in the end, he does get Trevor to hire him. he's accused of a double murder of his wife and lover at their house. And one of the ways that he's able to get Trevor to hire him is that he agrees that he's going to go to trial as quick as possible, not ask for a continuance, and that he's going to move full speed ahead. We do discover, spoiler alert, much later, that the reason he did that is because they find out they have one of the jurors in their pocket, or at least they think they do, and therefore they don't want a continuance because it would be a whole new jury pool, so on and so forth. And so we're going to sort of jump into the different aspects of the trial. Before we actually jump into the voir dire part, let me just sort of briefly mention the fact that like he obviously gets retained, he gets retained, Mickey does, and multiple times throughout episodes 2 through 5, like he has this thing where like Trevor Elliott's paying him a lot of money, but he's a horrible client.
You get me that appointment with Trevor.
That's the other thing. His office called and said he's going to be tied up in meetings all day. His new game's coming out. He said he will see you at the status conference tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Does this guy realize he's on trial for murder in a week?
He sort of shows up to the status conference, which, by the way, I'm not really sure if a defendant would be in a status conference in judges' chambers. I don't think that's a normal thing, but regardless, he's there with his lawyer and the prosecutor's there. And at one point, the court offers them a continuance with the people in agreement, and he can't say yes because his client says we have to go forward.
Mr. Holler, the court is offering you a continuance, and clearly the people are in agreement. So?
We'll be ready for trial next week, Your Honor.
You sure?
Yes, sir.
I better not regret this, Mr. Holler.
I don't see a scenario where that would ever happen. If the court looks at me in the face and says, we're offering you a continuance and the people are on board, can you really say no? Like, especially when you just took the case over a few days before, whatever it is. I'm just really curious what you guys think of that.
No normal attorney would do that. If a court is leaning, you can have a difficult client who wants you to go to trial. I can understand that. If you were in the situation where it is like a murder trial, where if any mistake at that point would be like you're essentially setting your client up for a really good ineffective assistance of counsel defense. So like you can't do that. You can't like honestly do that. I think you would either take the continuance and get fired or withdraw as counsel.
Well, I think even the prosecutor brings up the whole ineffective assistance of counsel thing and basically says like we would actually like to prevent that, so we'd offer a continuance as well.
So we're set to begin voir dire exactly 1 week from today, but I've yet to receive a motion for continuance from you, Mr. Holler.
Your Honor, the people would not oppose a continuance. Frankly, we want to avoid Mr. Elliott claiming ineffective assistance because his lawyer was unprepared.
Yeah.
And I honestly think the judge, if I'm a judge on a case and a new attorney gets put on the case a week before trial's supposed to start, and the people are on board for a continuance, and for some reason defense counsel doesn't want one, I think I'd order one anyway. Like, sorry,
That's also a possibility.
I know you want to go quickly, but and there are obviously speedy trial requirements. You only have so much time once someone's indicted to take them to trial, or essentially you're violating their constitutional rights. And I don't remember what that timeline is, and I'm sure at the state level it varies. But the court could easily say, look, you're brand new on the case. I understand, maybe your client is telling you they want to move forward. I seriously doubt that you can be prepared, so we're going to push a week or something like that. But I mean, other than what the judge said, it seems to me that your client has the final say on certain things. Your client has the final say on whether to take a settlement agreement, whether to take a plea bargain, obviously. They have control over a lot of the big questions around cases, but run-of-the-mill tactical scheduling decisions are not really up to the client. This is the kind of situation where I don't think you could ethically take on a criminal trial. And we'll talk about this more when we get to How to Get Away with Murder in a couple episodes. But I don't think you can ethically take on a case a week before trial and start from zero and get up to speed on a double murder criminal trial in a week and be
No,
competent
absolutely not.
at advocating for your client. You just can't. Whatever your client says. But it's got to be dramatic.
Yes, it does have to be dramatic. And so like step one is like there is this sort of overarching theme in episodes like 2 through 5, which is like, can Mickey just walk away and be like, fire me, like, or just withdraw his counsel because he's such a disaster of a client. But then again, he's paying a lot of money and he makes that known a couple times. But yeah, so, and like especially when, as we've sort of discovered, he basically has no case prior to going to trial. Like, he thinks there's a magic bullet, but which we are sometimes known as a silver bullet, which is basically the thing that wins your case. In this case, it was this GSR gunshot residue, but he had no idea what it was until they get to trial. But another thing that the client, that Trevor doesn't want, is he doesn't want to hire a jury consultant. In most cases, not most cases, but certainly in criminal cases, the case goes to a jury, not to a judge. There's a difference between a jury trial and a bench trial. And in this case, we're doing a jury trial, and there's going to be 12 jurors selected as well as backups. And typically, there's a jury consultant that is hired, especially for big cases. Not only is there the trope of like reading people, there is the trope I hate, which is someone plays poker and therefore can read people, especially when the one hand they show has nothing to do with reading people.
10,000. All in.
Cool.
King's Fool. Caught it on the river.
Sorry, big baby. Four of a kind.
Whoa. Straight flush.
She flops a royal flush or a straight whatever it is and does nothing when it comes to reading people or confusing them or anything. She just puts down the better hand at the end of the hand and wins the money. Like,
your skill is that you drew the best hand you can possibly have in the game, so you win.
Correct. She didn't bluff anyone off. She didn't confuse them. She literally just put the better hand down because she flopped the better hand. That's not going to impress anybody. And I laughed through that entire thing. So I feel like that happens all the time. Like, they use poker as a way of like, this person's smart and can read people, but it never makes any sense. And this was a total one of those situations.
And let's not forget, he's going to this essentially, poker shark poker. I'm not one for gambling, so a professional poker player to be a jury consultant on the down low because his client doesn't want to have an actual jury consultant.
Let me be clear. No jury consultant.
What are we doing here?
Trevor doesn't want a jury consultant.
So
So I'm not hiring one.
There are some, we're certainly not talking about, Casino Royale here or something. The whole thing just makes no sense.
So I was watching this while another famous voir dire was happening.
Yep.
So that was sort of an interesting overlap. I also might be prepping for my own voir dire soon. I might have a jury trial coming up, so I've been doing some work on that. So parts of the show are well done. Parts of the legal stuff they get right, and then parts of it I can't stand. I hate the trope of being able to read somebody from across the room. They're rubbing their legs, so they're lying. They look to the left, so they're lying. Like, the pseudoscience of that I cannot stand. There's nothing to that.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Golance. I'm the prosecutor. This is a murder trial. The defendant is charged with murdering his wife and her lover. And we want a fair, impartial jury. So I need to ask, would the fact that the victims were having an extramarital affair make it hard for anyone here to be impartial?
Two, 4, and 15 are bluffing. Keep them.
Your Honor, the people thank and excuse jurors 2, 4, and 15.
Shit, this guy's good.
There are specialists you can hire to advise you on jury selection, and like big white glove law firms will do that. And I'm sure that's happening in this other, the Trump trial is happening in the background while we're talking about this. I'm sure that his defense team has spent a tremendous amount of money surveying the locals, serving the people that, obviously they don't know ahead of time who's actually going to be on the jury, but I'm sure they spent a lot of money surveying people, trying to figure out what kind of person they're trying to look for here, what kind of news sources would help their side, or what sort of news sources they want their prospective jurors to be reading about. And they're not psychic, but there are certain things that really good polling might tell you if the people who work in this industry are likely to say this. That's what it would look like if you're doing a really good, and I've never been on a trial that has the funding that could afford to do that, but that's what it would look like if you were on $1 million trial, and they're trying to do something like that. You wouldn't hire a fucking poker player, someone whose skill is I'm really good at poker, so I'm good at reading people. That wouldn't be the way you would do it. Maybe Nate Silver, who's also good at poker, would be your.
It's just a random back end high end game where she happens to put the better hand down, and therefore we're supposed to be like, she's amazing at reading people, I guess. So to actually get to the voir dire, I will say the first time I watched this, without knowing where this goes, so without knowing that the jurors are going to have a big plot point, I was actually kind of excited that they were getting into the voir dire part, because I feel like that is not something that happens in other, TV shows or movies where we talk about trial. In fact, as we know, for instance, with some of the not so great movies we've watched previously, sometimes they just speed through pretrial like it's a day, and all of a sudden you're at trial. So the fact that they even did the voir dire part is actually kind of interesting.
See, jury selection is the one part of a trial that's a game. And like any game, it has rules. Each side gets 10 challenges. You can use those to strike any jury you want, but be careful.
Because the replacement might be even worse, right?
Exactly. So the trick is to hold on to as many bullets as you can and get the other side to fire theirs. Plus, this is your chance to introduce yourself and your client to the jury, not just as a lawyer or defendant, but as human beings. So use it.
And as Mike brought up, this is really interesting because this was also an anonymous jury, which is exactly what's happening at the Trump New York criminal trial that we're currently watching. And I do think they do a decent job of sort of explaining how the challenges work, and that you're trying to get people or potential jurors to get kicked out without having to use a challenge. You want them to be able to get kicked for cause without having to waste a challenge. But from the few experiences I've had with voir dire, I think the judge asks a lot more questions in real life. I think the judge doesn't just say, as he does here, occupation, marital status, and where you live, and then let the lawyers handle it. Typically, the judge does a lot more initial questioning. And I believe that's what's been happening with the Trump criminal trial, based on what I've been sort of reading, is the judge has actually been asking a lot of the questions and sort of kicking them before it even gets to the lawyers. And then the lawyers can start asking questions. They do sort of imply here that all of the questions are coming from the lawyers and that the judge isn't really doing anything. And I don't have much experience.
I would say that the Trump trial probably shouldn't be viewed as typical. The Trump trial, anyone who says that they can't be unbiased is being allowed to leave without any further questioning, which is understandable for this particular trial, but normally we need jurors too much to let them all just go.
Right. Normally you can't just say, I wouldn't be biased, and they just say, okay, get out of here. Normally they're like, well, congratulations, we only have a pool of 40 jurors to make a six juror pool. That's not going to
better have a better excuse. Yeah.
But honestly, I think they do a pretty decent job with the voir dire, at least how they explain it. I couldn't sit there and talk about all the little, when they talk about like this person's profession would be better for one side or the other. I think in some ways that might be true, but I always think that's also an overgeneralization if I had to guess.
You're right. Although I will say, going back to the hiring people to do these surveys, like they will be looking for certain lifestyles. Like this person, a cis male who works in this area, works at this job, is this percent likely to find in Trump's favor or something like that.
Yeah.
And like obviously none of those things are perfect. There's no way you can have perfect surveys, but it's the best that you could do. So like that's what you would do if you actually were trying to do a realistic version of this.
Well, and I do remember when he brings up there's one lawyer that's a potential juror, and I think it's the client says like, well, we don't want lawyers. And he goes, well, that person could be our foreperson.
Number 5's a lawyer. Lawyers make bad jurors, don't they?
Not necessarily. She could be our foreman. Juror number 5? What kind of law do you practice?
Real estate, mostly transactional.
You know, once you're a juror, you can't wear your lawyer hat. Would you be able to separate the two?
Of course.
Like, because there is something to the fact that you wouldn't mind having a lawyer who doesn't practice in that area to be the person who's sort of the de facto leader of the jury room, because they're actually going to sort of know somewhat what's happening and maybe be able to follow the rules more correctly. But I'm also not sure if that's true, because I've also been told by multiple people that they would never want a lawyer ever on a jury. So hard to know. Like, again, I think some of this goes back and forth. And I also think sometimes, like, the opinions have probably changed over the years when it comes to this. Like, I feel like the general population is a little bit more aware of how trials work now that they've watched the Johnny Depp Amanda Heard trial in live time, and that they've are actually paying attention to this. I think people actually have a little bit of a better idea of how trials work than they necessarily used to. And I don't know if that changes anything for better or worse. I think it definitely changes something.
Ours is not the first. This is not the first time in history that trials have been public. The O.J. Simpson trial.
I was gonna say it's been about 20 years since O.J. Yeah.
I agree on that, but I also, what's different about like talking about the Depp Heard trial was the immediate feedback you were getting from commentators. Like, you weren't even just watching, you were like, there were people who were having channels who were commentating as it's happening. And I feel like that's not something we've ever seen before.
Maybe the amount that it's happening, but I do think that maybe this is just an area we would disagree. I think that there was a lot of commentary about O.J. Simpson, or it's not the first time that legal analysts have had a job being on CNN.
No, fair enough.
Sure. But there also weren't regular people live tweeting it either.
Yeah. There weren't, forums were not so much of a thing.
One thing I want to throw out, and I think we've seen some of this in the Trump trial that isn't really addressed in the Lincoln Lawyer, is that a lot of these questions are written questionnaires that the jurors fill out and present. And I'll be upfront, I've never done a jury trial, so I've never dealt with voir dire. But when I was in law school, I was an intern at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they were dealing with a like there were like 17 defendants, I think, and all represented by different people. And everyone, the questions were from both sides were essentially presented to the judge and compiled into one single questionnaire. So it was not so much of the attorneys getting up one by one and asking each juror questions, because in that instance, I mean, in most times we see criminal trials on TV, there's the prosecution table and there's the defense table. This was the prosecution table, a second prosecution table, and then 7 defense tables for all their attorneys. You're not going to have all those attorneys get up and ask the questions that their clients want to have asked. It's just, you would never get through voir dire. And so compiling a written questionnaire that these we're asking of everyone, and the judge is essentially the one presenting them to the jurors to fill out and return, essentially like a proctored test or something like that. And then the attorneys pour over those, and maybe there are follow-up questions, but very few.
So I mean, honestly, like, so I think your point's well taken. Like, I do think a lot of the stuff is in writing. Like, they wouldn't do that initial occupation, marital status, where you live. They've already got 20, 30 questions already filled out. They would already know much more than that by the time they've actually stepped foot in the jury box, if I had to guess. But I think overall, I think like it does a pretty decent job of explaining how important voir dire is. Like, I do think it's very important when it comes, especially when it comes to criminal trials, to try to have the best jury for your side, if at all possible. And it does, you know, you can say it's a jury of your peers. Like, I like what Mickey says at one point.
Voir dire. That's what they call jury selection, right? That's French. Means to speak the truth. What?
The truth is the least of my concerns. I don't want fair-minded jurors. I want them biased as hell. Biased for me. I want 12 lemmings in a box. And the DA wants the exact same thing. So I tried to get rid of his lemmings, and he tries to get rid of mine. That's how you pick a jury.
I was intrigued by Mickey bringing to the court's attention that he's got one woman that he wants to make sure stays on the jury, that he thinks the prosecution's going to object to. And so he raises with the court the fact that the defendant the defense counsel has already struck, I think it was like 6 or 7 women of the 8 or 9, I guess, at that point that they had.
We should definitely, sorry, go on. Yeah.
That showed a potential bias against female jurors.
We're down to the wire. We've each got one challenge left. What do you think they're gonna cut?
Number 10, that's his best bet.
Yeah, I might have a way to deal with that, though.
Counsel, you ready?
Your Honor, the defense has a motion that's best brought up in chambers. May we confer? Your Honor, the defense would like to make a Wheeler motion.
I'm sorry, what?
On what grounds?
Mr. Golands has used 9 of his challenges, 7 of which have been on women. In my view, that's called discrimination.
It's called offensive. I have a valid reason for every juror I've cut.
I'm sure we would love to hear them.
It doesn't even make sense. Your client is accused of murdering his wife. I want all the women I can get.
And why did you cut so many?
Mr. Golan, save it. You're reaching here, Mr. Holler. Motion denied.
Playing that card before the prosecutor might strike the woman that it seems to be through whatever pseudoscience of body language and whatnot, leaning toward the defendant was an intriguing move. I'm not sure it would play out that way in court. How those motions in limine get filed, I don't.
We should probably mention what a Batson challenge is. Sorry, we skipped over that. So a Batson challenge, and if I mess something up, please correct me. Batson challenge, if one side is objecting to jurors who seem to have one particular gender or race or ethnicity, you're not allowed to just strike jurors just because they're all black or just because they're all Asian. Now, maybe there's some other reason that they're striking those jurors. Each one of those jurors said, I could never trust a cop. Well, in which case, if you're the prosecution, you probably don't want them not trusting the police officer that's going to come up there as a witness. So if they can offer an explanation, and I hope I'm not messing this up. If they can offer an explanation that is race or gender neutral for why they are striking those people, usually it's allowed to stand. Does that sound correct? Did I mess that up?
I think that generally describes it. And like, I'll actually very briefly dive into a case that this was relatively recently applicable. There was the Supreme Court case of Flowers, who actually my law professor, Ray Johnson, represented, where he got tried 4 different times for the same case. There were 36 black prospective jurors that the state could have struck, and they struck all 36 over the course of the 4 trials. So he never had a black juror in the first 4 trials, and they did not properly apply Batson, that the Supreme Court or the Mississippi Supreme Court did not apply Batson in concluding that his actions were not motivated by a discriminatory intent. The Supreme Court overturned his conviction because of that, and I don't think they retried him. But that's like a situation where, like, yeah, there might be legitimate reasons to strike a juror that's not necessarily discriminatory, but you have to be able to demonstrate what they are. I
that's
think go for it, Mike.
Yep, sorry. And I think that's what Mickey Holler was trying to hint at when he was saying all the female potential jurors have been struck. So that part I think they got right. A lot of the law stuff I thought they got right in trial, and we'll go on more of that soon. Mickey Holler, through the course of episode 4, discovers that $100,000 have been missing from the prior attorney's account. He believes it was used to bribe a juror.
What's so urgent? I couldn't wait till morning.
How did you do it?
Do what?
How do you bribe a juror months before they're receiving a jury panel?
What the hell are you talking about?
You refused to take a continuance because you had to go to trial right away.
I told you, my company...
Bullshit! Nobody gambles their freedom on a business deal, Trevor. Jury summonses go out for a specific date, so you knew. You knew if you could get a potential juror on your panel, you might be able to pull this off. That's why you didn't want a jury consultant. It's why you demanded final say on the jurors. And that stunt you pulled in the garage to get that juror kicked off, you planted somebody.
I'm an aerospace engineer at Lockheed Martin. I'm single, and I live in Palos Verdes.
It's juror number 7, isn't it?
I don't know who the guy is or anything about him. All I know is he's bought and paid for.
All right, you're on you inherit a trial. At some point, you learn your predecessor may have bribed one of the jurors. You have reason to believe that. What is the next step there so that you are not guilty of jury tampering or some other conspiracy to commit jury tampering, whatever other offenses you want to layer on top of that? At what point do you come forward and say this? Well, your client, you now know your client may have committed a crime in jury tampering, so you can't confess to that part. I think what I would do is just call the ethics hotline and go through the facts with them as best I could. I think that would be the immediate step I would do. Failing that, I guess an anonymous letter is the next best thing you can do.
I would hire an attorney. To
ethics.
To advise me on this specifically. Yeah.
And this is another reason a continuance should have been
attorney
granted.
malpractice and ethics. And
because you are honestly, malpractice might not be enough. You need somebody who's has experience in criminal law, because you are now on the verge of committing some serious fucking felonies, real jail time if you're tampering with the jury.
Right. I mean, in addition to disbarment and everything else, but yes, it's not great for anybody. I guess so that we're sort of talking about the breakfast where Mickey was talking with legal.
I think Jerry Vincent may have paid a bribe.
To who?
I don't know yet. I don't even know if it's true, but there's money missing. A couple of months now.
Well, there's only 3 people it could be, right? The judge, a juror, or maybe the prosecutor.
No, this DA Golands, he would run over his own mother to win a case. Comes from money, too.
Well, you just picked a jury. You said this money's been missing for a couple of months. So you may have the judge in your pocket.
Well, I don't have anybody in my pocket. Legal, I didn't do anything.
Exactly. Now I know why you wanted to talk to me. You want to know what he would do.
So?
If your dad inherited a case from a lawyer and then found out that he paid a bribe, he wouldn't do a damn thing. He'd take it as a sign from God.
Just to jump in and mention, legal is Mickey's father's associate attorney, who's now, I guess, it's Elliot Gould's character, but they've never really established why he calls him legal. But
it's just his name.
His name is Legal?
I think so.
Okay. Well, moving on.
You guys keep going. I'm gonna check the
that's just so those who haven't watched the show can make any sense of what Derrick just said. Put that out. Legal is a retired attorney.
If you're listening to this and you have not watched the show, this is going to get real weird a lot. So I would highly recommend you watch the show, just for you know, I think
I mean, that
that's
is
the-
true of all our episodes. Yeah.
I believe his name is Legal Siegel.
No, it's not. Well,
that's his name. I'm not saying it's great, but I think that's his name in the
I
show.
mean, I suppose I had a classmate in, well, Mike and I had a classmate in law school whose last name was Law. So I guess weirder things have happened, but your first name being Legal,
Oh,
that's
okay.
like some mid 18th century, you know.
I do see somewhere where it's David Legal Siegel.
Okay.
But anyway, his name is Legal. Let's just go with that.
All right.
So anyway, so the honest answer to your question, Mike, is I have no idea what I would do. Because, and I think the sort of issue that Mickey has is that he's got a lot of where there's like smoke, but there's no fire. Like, it just doesn't seem right. And he's got a lot of questions, but he doesn't have enough information to go off of. What the hell do you do in that situation?
And it should be mentioned that the ethics code, and it varies again from state to state, but the ethics code is generally where you have knowledge that your practice is being used to forward a crime, or where you have knowledge that someone's going to give false statements. He has suspicions. Does he have knowledge? And that's sort of the crux of, that's why I would hire somebody independent to
I thought I was pretty familiar with attorney-client privilege, but the show did cite something that I had never heard.
There's one more exception to attorney-client privilege. If my client's about to commit a crime, I have to report it. Unless I can stop that crime from happening, then it's no harm, no foul, and nobody ever has to know.
I had not heard that yet before, which is interesting. And I guess, is this technically crime fraud, or is it just crime itself? Yeah.
I mean, at a certain
I mean, I guess
sure, if you dissuade your client from taking any action that is part of a crime, I guess then that is you doing your job, really.
Yeah.
But if they have taken concrete steps, attempted fraud is still fraud, even if it's unsuccessful. You know, if they take affirmative steps toward the commission of a crime such that they could be convicted of attempted whatever, then you dissuading them partway through is not preventing them from committing a crime. I mean, the real answer is you get out of the case. I mean, I realize it's a high profile. He wants to make money, but you get out of the case.
Hi everyone, Derrick here with a brief message. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by my law firm Morwa P. LLC. One of Morwa's practice areas is business law. If you are a business owner or someone who is thinking of starting up a new or side business, you need a legal team who can efficiently provide you legal counsel, keeping you and your business away from potential legal issues, and if necessary, represent you in any disputes that do arise. We pride ourselves on being cost efficient while also getting to know our clients. If you want less stress and more support, you need Morwa. If you would like to set up a free consult, please click on the link in the show notes or email us at contact@mooreatty.com. That's MOOREATTY.com. And now back to the show.
Here's what I'm going to say about my thoughts on the trial. It is very entertaining. Like, just as a general matter, it's very entertaining. It would never go the way it actually went. The amount of irrelevant questions that get asked with an appropriate objection of relevance, and then Holler goes, I'll get there, Your Honor. Just give me a couple questions. Never gets there. But then the prosecutor doesn't seek to strike the witness or anything. It just sort of ends, and the prosecutor goes, no further questions.
Was that the only video you shot in Malibu that day?
Well, that day, yes, but I was also in Malibu the night before.
Why was that?
Objection. What possible relevance?
All will be revealed in the fullness of time, Your Honor.
Keep the fishing brief, Mr. Holler.
There was an incident around 2 a.m. up in Topanga State Park. Some guy shot off a bunch of rounds at some sheriff's deputies.
Is that footage on here too?
Yes, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. Again, relevance. And this other footage wasn't turned over in discovery.
It was, actually.
The entire contents of the footage Mr. Munoz shot was put into evidence, Your Honor. It's not my fault you didn't bother to watch the whole thing.
Get where you're going, Mr. Hall.
Almost there, Judge.
The explanation that you saying that telling the judge, I'll get there, like maybe there's some judge that you've appeared in front of a million times that'll give you some rope. But that's a one in a million kind of thing where they're going to let you do that, especially let you do that repeatedly, especially when the judge already has questions about your behavior. That's like, if they have the appropriate objection, a judge still might let you go. It's possible, but there's always the chance that they'll claw it back. They don't want to put themselves in the position where they have to do this. So they're probably just not going to let you do it. And you're going to have to find some other way to get it in, or you won't get it in at all. I'm trying to remember what objections there were that were good.
I mean, there are several objections that he calls witnesses that have not been disclosed to the other side when it's not rebuttal. There are circumstances where the witness said, the other side's witness says something on the stand that you have evidence is untrue, but you would only call a witness to rebut that evidence or to refute that witness if that witness said something false. So under those circumstances, sure, you can call somebody as a rebuttal witness. But just, we only learned this guy's name today. It
is not an excuse.
Is not an excuse. There are ways to do that. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what someone's name is or things like that. And by the way, the first thing I would do when I learn, he was put in the same car as this guy who was firing off, 100 rounds of ammunition, is go to the prosecutor and say, your last bit of any real evidence just fell apart. So let's talk. 'Cause you've got nothing. That would be my first call. And then you say to here's the witness's information. We can call them. We can agree to call them in a week or something to give you time to prepare. There are ways to do this.
Right.
Sure, they're not.
Also, the fact that you refused a continuance prior to this, which would have given you time to figure out this guy's name, the court might might read that very negatively. They might say, if you wanted to introduce this person, you should have taken the continuance that was offered.
And to the show's credit, the judge does say something along those lines.
My apologies to the court and to Mr. Haller.
Your Honor, the jury is
Mr. Haller, if you'd taken the continuance the court had offered, then perhaps you would have had time to properly examine the document. The evidence stands. If you have any further questions for this witness, ask. Otherwise, it's almost 4:30.
And they sort of imply that one of the reasons why the judge lets Mickey get some of this in is because the prosecutor calls the friend of Laura, whose name I'm not going to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't do a later, what's good for the goose is good for the gander type situation. You called someone to have a chance to prepare for, so therefore he can do it. I was like, that's not how that works.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Dennis Byrne to the stand.
Objection. Sidebar. Your Honor, this witness was not on the defense's list.
Well, that's because I just learned his name a few seconds ago.
You're putting on a witness you've never spoken to.
I know who he is, Your Honor, and this isn't the first time somebody's put on a witness that wasn't on the list.
I haven't had any time to prepare for questioning this witness.
Well, that makes two of us. Geoff, we're on the same boat here.
What's good for the goose, Mr. Golands? But this is it, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Your Honor.
There's no way he would have allowed it the way it happens in this actual case.
I've had judges let one side get away with some hearsay, so they'll let the other side introduce some hearsay. Yeah, I let that one thing in, so I'll let everything in, kind of thing.
I'm pretty confident though that a judge would not in a murder trial let the defense side guy whose name they learned minutes before. I'm confident that's not a thing.
They could have rolled it to the next day. They could have just been like, okay, you all have 24 hours to figure out who this is and if I should let him in.
Right. But yeah, so listen, and by the way, I get why they did this. It's more suspenseful. It was, it was, even we as viewers weren't exactly sure where he's going with this. They did a pretty good job of hiding the ball from us. And so we're like, what the hell is happening? Where are we going with this? Then when they put the expert, Dr. Islanian, on the stand, Oh my God, that entire line of questioning is objectionable because they use an expert witness to literally walk through the entire story.
Given the amount of residue on Mr. Elliott, he would have to have been exposed to a truly overwhelming amount of GSR.
Dr. Aslanian, I'd like you to take a look at this video. Do you see a man being loaded into a sheriff's vehicle?
Yes.
We've established that this man's name is Eli Wims and that he fired over 90 rounds of ammunition that night. He was then loaded into the back of this patrol vehicle and driven to the county jail.
Your Honor, I must object.
I don't think so, Mr. Golanz. Overruled.
Now, Dr. Aslanian, in a situation like I just described, how much gunshot residue would be transferred into the backseat of that patrol car?
If someone fired 90 rounds of ammunition, the amount of gunshot residue would be off the charts.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Dr. Aslanian, can you please read the number on the top of that patrol vehicle? The one with the spotlight shut out?
It says 112.
112. This is my client, Trevor Elliott, being loaded into the back of a sheriff's vehicle about 12 hours later. Can you read the number on the top of that vehicle?
It's 112.
We established that this vehicle was not cleaned between the time Mr. Wims rode in it and the time Mr. Elliott was placed in it. So, Dr. Aslanian, in your opinion, could that account for the gunshot residue on my client's hands?
In my opinion, given the staggering amount of GSR, it's the only thing that could account for it.
I do know he gets there, but there's no way the judge would have let them do those 20 questions to get it all the way. Why is this expert witness staring at a cop car on the screen? Like, how would the judge be like, yeah, this is cool. No issue here whatsoever.
Right. Because expert witnesses answer opinion questions. They like, the whole reason to have an expert is because the jury probably isn't going to be able to grasp the complexities of whatever issue. So they have to give their expert opinions on things. And just what's the number on the top of this cop car? It's not a fucking expert.
Also, the video guy could have said that. Like, anyone could have said that.
Right.
If you were going to you could have gotten most of that in with the expert. You just would have started from the end. You would start with, like, how much residue was on Trevor Elliott? Is that the normal amount of residue you would expect from however many gunshots were on there? No. Well, what if, are there other ways to get gun residue on you? Transference. Oh, so if you're going to if someone were going to have this much residue on them through transference, it would have to be a lot of gunshots, wouldn't it? Yes. And you would have to rephrase that a little bit. And then be like, so this one incident where this guy shot off 8 million rounds and then was put in the car, and then Trevor Elliott is the next person in the car, would that be sufficient? Yes.
Right.
Like, I think that would work. You guys can tell me if
But it's not nearly as awesome as what ended up happening.
Yeah.
Which, she gets on the stand and the first thing she says is her opinion is she agrees with the other side's GSR expert. And you're like, what the hell is happening? And why is she on the stand? And then 30 questions later, she's won the case for the defense side, which is kind of fun. So I get it. It's very entertaining. There's no way it would fly.
And it's a problem of just legal dramas generally. There is not trial by surprise. And part of the reason, especially in a criminal trial, that the defense isn't going to spring evidence on the prosecution is you're wasting your client's time. They're sitting they're either in jail or out on pretrial release and have all these restrictions placed on them. And if you're holding off on telling the prosecution that their case is in shambles for even a couple days, you're subjecting your client to things that they may not have to be subjected to.
And again, if you had this information on the GSR, like I think you said, Geoff, you would shine a spotlight on this for the opposing side. That is how cases get kicked out. Like, before you've ever been to trial, is you would shine the brightest spotlight on it and be like, this is your best evidence and we are shoving it down your throat. And in some ways, I think like there could have been if they had done a motion at pretrial, they might have been able to get some stuff kicked out because of it. Like it's kind of, but anyway.
Yeah.
So I do agree with Mike on certain that there is some good objections. There's the argumentative objections. There's a couple other things where they do make the appropriate objection. A couple of times the judge even says to the jury, ignore, the question or answer, whatever, because it was so argumentative and it was, not appropriate, which is how that's supposed to go. That didn't happen every time. There were some times where it was a clear inappropriate question and they did the famous withdrawn and walked away and no one said shit.
So you didn't just confront Mr. Rails, you confronted my investigator as well.
I was simply making a point.
By threatening to kill him?
Objection!
Withdrawn. No further questions, Your Honor.
Did your company own a Heckler & Koch 45 semi-automatic that was used as a model for this gun?
No.
Okay, so a search of your company's business transactions wouldn't reveal any such purchase?
No, it would not.
And the fact that it was the same exact gun, that's just a coincidence then?
Objection, argumentative.
I'll withdraw the question. Nothing further, Your Honor.
That doesn't fly for the most part in courtrooms. In fact, I'm confident the judge would not let you get away with doing that one more time without them, heavily admonishing you. But I do think really the big thing that got me is just the irrelevance. 80% of his questions are irrelevant and would have gotten objected and would have been struck if this was a real trial, I think. So anyway, one question that I'm still confused about to this day, why the hell did Trevor Elliott testify?
I was just going to ask. Because guess what? There's a debate going on right now. Do we think Trump is going to take the stand in his criminal trial? Of course, by the time this comes out, this will be 3 months from now. So
well,
everyone will know the answer. But
maybe they'll continue. I mean, it's hard to know.
The general advice, and sometimes it's overstated, is that you don't take the stand in your own defense trial. There are exceptions. There's time, I've heard very good defense attorneys talk about, in this situation, I would let this person take his hand. I'll bet every penny I'm worth, Donald Trump is not going to take the stand in his own defense trial. It would be really bad for him. He's a terrible witness. He makes 1,000 inconsistent statements. He's made these statements in the past. You wouldn't want him on the stand in his own defense trial. He didn't take the stand in his more recent civil cases. He's not going to do it in the criminal case.
Yeah. And Trevor Elliott's excuse for taking the stand is ridiculous. He wants to prove himself innocent in the court of public opinion.
I told you, Mickey, I need to win in the court of public opinion, too.
And I told you, no lawyer can give you that.
Of course, only I can do that. That's why I need to testify.
Well, Trevor, what are you talking about? We won. Your investors are gonna get what they want.
Yeah, but I won't. Not if I don't clear my name.
Trevor, listen. Don't do this.
And he did a shit job at it. He did a terrible fucking job. It's one thing if you're really disciplined, if the case is very clear, if you're a very sympathetic person. This character is intentionally painted to be unsympathetic from the very beginning. As soon as he's on the screen, you're like, this guy killed his wife. I don't know what he's accused of, but I know he killed his wife. I know nothing about the show. First scene, he's like, this guy, white killer.
And again, there's a reason why defendants don't take the stand. It's because anyone can can prepare a direct examination that's decent. The cross will ruin you every single time. A good lawyer is going to cross you and make you look like a moron. And that's kind of what happened here. And honestly, it wasn't even a great cross, and it still looked like he killed her, in my opinion. But it doesn't make sense. Based on how the show went, it does not make sense why he took the stand. There is no obvious rationale as to why he had to take the stand and why he claimed he had to, and I don't get it. Especially after they had just done the GSR stuff and, from my opinion, won the case. Even this whole public opinion crap, public opinion doesn't give a crap if you they don't care. You just won the case. It's mind-boggling. and I'm still not sure I understand it based on like get all the way through the rest of the season. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So.
I agree. I think it's a shot against Mickey in the sense that like some of the things he gets caught up on, we're hearing about for the first time that he didn't clear his calendar the next day or something. We're hearing
right
like multiple negative facts that Mickey probably should have been aware of, and like should have been aware of or like should have known that there's probably more out there that I'm gonna get caught with. There's no reason like
So the other question here is, well, not the other question, but the other aspect of this is that in a criminal trial, the defendant has the right to take the stand. If you're their attorney and they insist on taking the stand, you can't deny them that. You can do your best to dissuade them.
Right.
But if they're on the stand, if they want to tell their story, then if you think they're going, if you have reason to believe they're going to give false testimony, then you can put them on the stand and basically take a step back and say, what would you like to say? You can't solicit false testimony from a witness on the stand. Testimony.
Right.
You can't knowingly solicit false testimony from a witness.
Knowingly is the big part there.
It's really infuriating because the show asks the question like, why would you want to do this? This is a terrible idea. And then they never answer it.
They don't give a good answer.
Yeah.
So
it's like it gives them one more beat, like for plot reasons, it gives them one more beat to have Mickey win the day one more time. But that's it. That's the reason they did it.
And as expected, it doesn't go great. And I mean, again, not horrible, but it doesn't go great. And then we can segue right to the closing. I'm sorry, the prosecutor's closing is that of a defeated man.
But common sense and logic will tell you who fired the bullets that ended the lives of Laura Elliott and Jan Rills that day. And you heard the defendant testify that he loved his wife. But what does love mean to a man like Trevor Elliott? He used Laura as the model for his video game because that's what he wanted her to be, an empty shell that he could control with a few buttons. He locked his wife in a gilded cage, and when she tried to break free, he murdered her and her boyfriend. Because if Trevor Elliott couldn't have Laura, neither could anyone else. Simply put, Trevor Elliott is guilty. If common sense and logic are your guide, there is no other conclusion.
It is not a great closing. I don't think I think your closing, especially with that GSR, you need to explain to the jury why that doesn't matter. And he kind of ignores it or just sort of sets it aside. It's not a great closing, if you ask me. I'm curious if you guys have thoughts, but I think they may have done it for the purpose of because the prosecutor had prior to him taking the stand had offered 9 to 11 years or something as a plea bargain. And
I don't remember.
And basically,
it was.
He doesn't sell it well, and Mickey's like, "You're not a great salesperson." He's like, "I never have had to be," and it's like, "Well, you're not doing a great job." Similar with his closing, I think his closing's terrible. I'm just gonna say, I actually think Mickey's off the cuff closing is very good.
7 minutes from when Mr. Elliott arrived until the videographer began filming him outside of his house. 7 minutes for him to commit these crimes and cover them up. Now, the victims were shot at point-blank range. There was no blood on Mr. Elliott's clothes or hands. That means he would have had to clean up and change before the deputies arrived. And that brings us to the gun. Now, Mr. Golan says that this cartoon weapon is somehow proof that Mr. Elliott must have owned a gun like this. But if that's true, then where is it? Where is the real gun that killed Laura Elliott and Jan Rills? Where are the bloody clothes? Now, the beach house is on top of a hill. It's a 10-minute drive down to the PCH, and the police searched the entire area with dogs and found nothing. Nothing. Yet Mr. Golans wants you to believe that in 7 minutes, Mr. Elliott shot his wife and her lover, cleaned up, and disposed of the evidence where the police could never find it. It's impossible. And that is what math tells us. It tells us that Mr. Elliott didn't do it. And the real killer, whoever it was, took the evidence with him.
He hits the 2 or 3 big things that are, I think, I would have a very hard time coming out of that closing and thinking that Trevor Elliott was guilty after that closing.
Yeah.
Also, they never.
Go ahead, Mike.
He introduced the timing thing for the first time there. Like that probably should have been a point hammered from the beginning, middle, and end. That like this doesn't make sense timing wise. There's no blood splatter. What the fuck's going on here?
Yeah,
and the defense never has an explanation for that. Or the prosecution never has an explanation for that.
Yeah, right. You would have certainly assumed that's in the opening. That would have been a like keep this in mind throughout that the timing does not make sense.
Also, why that's the thing you could have asked the expert. Why, like you're an expert in gunshots. Why is there no blood splatter? Wouldn't that be a thing that would happen with the gun?
Right.
Yeah. The poorness of the prosecutor's closing statement or closing argument is, I think, evidenced by the fact that I don't remember it, but I remember Mickey's. And Derrick and I just got done with a marathon of moot court judging where, well, Derrick wasn't judging so much, but he did some, where we give feedback to law students who are arguing a case in front of us. And the closing statements, the closing arguments are, an attorney's last opportunity to make an impression on the jury. You're giving you're trying to succinctly boil down the case to the key points, and I think Mickey does a good job of that. The prosecution does not, and I agree with you, Derrick. I don't know how walking out of that you could be like, yeah, they didn't. How did he get rid of all the evidence?
And in fact, that's exactly what happened, because the jury comes back in what, a matter of either,
it was like half an hour or something.
Maybe a half hour, maybe it's unclear if it's minutes or hours, but it certainly is the same day, and it does not take very long. Which is, by the way, what I would expect. Like, as I was watching for the first time, I'm like, there's no way a jury, I mean, especially given the high burden of, a criminal trial, right? So like, this isn't a civil trial where it's just preponderance of the evidence. Is it more likely than not that, the defendant did what they're accused of? Like, a criminal is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard. And I'm not even sure I would have gone for them if it were a civil trial, let alone the beyond a reasonable doubt of a, criminal trial. So I think it sounds like we're all in the sort of opinion of like, the verdict's correct. Like, based on what the prosecution did, they did not meet their burden.
Based on the evidence in front of them, the theory about the time is never, there's no explanation for it. It doesn't make any sense. I think it's, it sucks when they do these things for plot reasons, that it's more dramatic for Mickey to make this argument for the first time at the very end, when he should have made it at the very beginning, asked both the experts about it, asked it at the end. Like, there's no one ever offers any rebuttal to it. And it's like a pretty bulletproof argument until you introduce the magic of drones.
You know what the best part is? I watched you do it. We all did. You weren't checking your emails, huh, when the cops arrived. You were controlling the drone that was carrying the gun and your clothes. You sent it out over the ocean until it sank where no one would ever find it. I gotta hand it to you, that was clever.
What drone does he have that could theoretically carry a gun and all of his clothes all the way down into the ocean and all the way back?
He doesn't have to come back.
I don't think it has to come back. I think he could just crash into the ocean.
Yeah,
but that's still
commercial
like
drones. This is a thing that could, like, you can buy a drone that can do commercial things and have commercial. Now, actually, that's the problem. If it were a commercial scale drone, it's probably registered with the FAA.
I've looked into getting a drone because I find it interesting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Just as a hobby. But it turns out
with a flying machine, it's cool. Yeah.
if you have a drone of really any substantial size, anything bigger than essentially a toy, it's it's registered by the FAA. They all have transponders that track where they are, and if you are being reckless with them, there was recently a guy in Philadelphia who got fined several like tens of thousands of dollars for flying his drone recklessly over like streets and whatnot. They track drones. and they would know if he owned a drone, and especially they would know if he owned one large enough to carry a payload of, a full change of clothes and a gun. And they would have its transponder signal. Like this.
No, it's a thing that is technically possible, and this is a guy who's magically able to, find out who's going to be on a jury months ahead of time, scope them out, replace them. So I guess like, as far as movie magic goes, like you could get a drone that's capable of doing this, disable the transponder, buy it on the black market so it's in somebody else's name. This is something that is technically possible.
Right. For those who haven't watched the show, Mickey did it. He got rid of the evidence by flying his incriminating evidence.
Trevor did it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Trevor did it. I keep doing that.
Mickey actually did it the whole time. He's the criminal. What a twist!
Framed Trevor. Trevor actually did it. The way he got rid of the evidence was flying it out on this drone. Mickey only discovers that afterward, even though they play video several times from this videographer who has, the cops are there and he's just playing around on his phone. There's no situation where the cops arrive at a double murder scene and let the one guy there, the husband of one of the people who's dead, fiddle around on his phone for who knows how long. It's just never going to happen. You don't have to give them the password for your phone, but they're going to confiscate your phone.
And then they look at the phone and it's like drone footage flying into the ocean.
Right.
Yeah, that's not really feasible at all. What to keep going on sort of the post-trial stuff, I think this is the last thing I want to discuss, and if you guys have anything else we can chat about. But what are your thoughts on, and again, I get why he does this, but so he's found not guilty, and then Mickey just keeps going and just sort of keeps diving into the case and finding out that he actually did it. Isn't that just how it works? I mean, you can't tell me this is the first person he's had who he finds out later he got off.
Did it, right.
I think that, to defend the show, maybe part of the motivation is did he kill the prior attorney? Is that something that would be relevant to him?
Correct. Well, and that was still very late. So episode 10 brings a lot of things together in a very quick period of time, right? Because we get to the end of 9 and you're like, okay, he juror 7 appears and looks like he's about ready to kill Mickey. That's what we have.
Falls off a fucking cliff.
Yeah, then falls off a cliff, which is solid. That's a great way for him to go, is to fall off a cliff because it just is there. It's at the end of a road. It's the cliff.
It had been so long since we'd seen Juror 7 that I didn't know who the fuck that was.
Oh, and it's dark. It takes a second to realize.
Wait, are we supposed to know who that was? That looked like, in the brief moment, the prior guy's private investigator. And
you also don't see, you don't spend that much time with Juror 7 to begin with. So it's not like I was super familiar with this guy.
Right.
And he's just a generic engineer. It's not like he's there's anything unique about him where you'd be like, oh yeah, totally, juror number whatever. No, that's the whole point of him being a plant, is that he's just a generic engineer, white guy, beard, you don't even notice they're there. And then all of a sudden he's the one killing, and you're like, should I know who this person is and why is this? So
it'd be funny if they made him super distinct. Oh yeah, juror 7, he only has one arm. That's how we know he's trustworthy. And then he comes there like some one-armed man trying to fight him.
Oh, we're gonna have to do The Fugitive at some point.
I know, that's the reference.
I'm looking forward to that.
Well, what would the jury consultant say about the one-armed man? Is that person trustworthy or not? Anywho, good times. So I think that's anything else you guys want to hit about the Trevor Elliott trial? I think we hit a good chunk of it.
Do we want to talk about the third party? The cops never investigated the other guy.
Oh, and also the third party attorney popping in out of nowhere.
That's not the Elliott trial. That's his other client.
That's the Jesus Menendez one.
No, the Trevor Elliott trial, the guy that threatened to kill the yoga teacher.
Your Honor, if I may.
Who are you?
I'm Mr. Shavar's counsel. Mr. Shavar's past employment in Israel, whatever it may be, has no bearing on this case.
Your Honor, objections, random person who's watching the trial. Like, if you represent a witness to a trial and you are not one of the parties, you can tell the judge about it ahead of time. You don't have to barge into the fucking room. You're like, Your Honor, hi.
By the way, this is definitely a thing that the Lincoln lawyer does, because this will happen multiple times over the course of, well, it obviously happened in episode 10 with Jesus Menendez, and it will happen in season 2 as well, where like a lawyer just appears from nowhere to represent the witness on the stand, and with no understanding of who the hell the person is, and the judge goes,
Like,
"Why
literally,
are you there?"
At the very least, the court reporter would be like, "Can I have your ID number? Can I have spell your name so I can put it in the transcript?" like that's irrelevant. I represent the.
I got to assume in real life, like, wouldn't the lawyer actually be at one of the tables?
I mean, first the lawyer might be trying to quash a subpoena to get them to their witness to testify.
So
you would probably have seen them at pretrial doing that.
Right. They would have already filed. They would have already been a motion to try to get them out. Yeah.
We probably would have been aware of this person, like, if not, like, probably that pretrial hearing is probably the first time you would have seen them. If not then like, I don't know, before the trial actually starts, you would have like had them. Maybe there's some reason that they have to come in very late, but you still would have, like, nobody should be surprised. Everybody in the courtroom is going to know the day of the trial, this guy represents this witness.
Yeah, and they might bring in another table for them. I mean,
yeah,
I've like I said, I've never done a jury trial, but I've had hearings where we've called witnesses. None of them.
I completely forgot about this.
None of them have, had counsel other than defense counsel. But it would be trivial to bring up a third table and be like, okay, you're representing, you're representing this witness. You have very limited grounds to object, but you can sit there and object if something comes up. Also, his objection was not anything in the rules of evidence I've ever heard of. Objection.
I completely forgot the scene happened, and it was just like a mess. This is probably, all right. Good.
Objection. So Mickey asks, how far back?
Well, so let's talk about the third party culpability generally, and then we can segue into this. So as part of Mickey's argument, in addition to poking holes in the prosecution's case, they also bring up another person who could be, they brought up another person who could plausibly have killed the two people, which is known as a third party culpability argument, where you're basically saying there's a third party who is not present who may have done the murder. When this becomes obvious that Mickey's making this argument, the prosecutor says, like, he's not allowed to do this. We would have held a hearing and the court could have actually looked into this.
Anton Shavar is the husband of another one of Jon Rail's private yoga clients. Now, there's evidence as to Mr. Shavar's threatening encounters with Mr. Rails.
Your Honor, this is an obvious attempt to backdoor in a third-party culpability defense. He's trying to confuse the jury.
This is an attempt to get to the truth about who actually killed these two people. Now, the witness said he hadn't even considered the possibility that Mrs. Elliott wasn't the target.
Just 2 brief questions, huh?
I only have one follow-up, Judge.
I don't think that's a thing. I don't think there's such thing as a third-party culpability hearing. I just think, no, should the court have been aware that this is an argument? Probably. But I don't think there would have been a hearing held. Yeah, there probably would have been like motions in limine and things like that in order to figure out whether they could bring it up. But that's part of the argument, is that there's a third party involved who could have done the murder, and the police got tunnel vision, never looked into that person, so on and so forth.
And this is the part that Mickey, that I thought the show did well, where it's like, oh, we have 2 aspects to this defense. Or it's funny because they only introduced the 2 aspects, and really it's the third aspect in the closing. But it's, the gun thing doesn't quite make sense. Here's why. Here's the defense to their best evidence, and then here's a third party that really could have done it. Here's him threatening another person over the exact same situation.
And the conceit is that this guy runs a security firm and is former Mossad or something like that.
Objection. He represents a top secret organization for another government. Why the fuck would that be an objection?
I run a private security and intelligence firm.
That's an interesting job. How did you get into that?
I have a background in intelligence in Israel.
So you were in the Mossad?
I did not say that.
No, but I need you to answer the question. Were you in the Mossad, an organization which is known to carry out targeted assassinations?
Objection.
Your Honor, if I may.
Who are you?
I'm Mr. Shavar's counsel. Mr. Shavar's past employment in Israel, whatever it may be, has no bearing on this case and could jeopardize the national security of one of this country's closest allies.
It's all right, Your Honor. I'll take that as a yes.
Move to strike.
Granted. The jury will disregard Mr. Holler's last remark.
I'll take that as a yes.
Like, what would the objection be there? What could you object to there? It's like being part of Mossad. It's like, well, you can't plead the fifth there because being part of Mossad. I mean, you could, I guess, but like, what would you? I was just read that.
Pleading the fifth
like,
would probably be the way for him to go, but
it's one of those like, how does that imply you? Yeah, I guess that's all you can do.
It's weird because he's sprung as a like surprise witness almost.
Mm-hmm.
It within the trial, it seems as though him calling this witness is news to the prosecution, but the witness is there, so the witness got a summons. He's there with his attorney. He takes the stand. Like, I don't understand if you subpoena a witness to show up in court, the other side gets a copy of that. Like, there would be all sorts of arguments that took place. And
I'm just thinking about this now. As part of the pretrial motions, one of the things you're going to be turning over is your witness list. One of the issues with this show is that he has a week to prepare for this trial.
Yeah.
All of the filings were due more than a week ago. Almost certainly. Like all
months.
Yeah. So like, I mean, it could be 30 days or something like that, but it's like, it's more than you got this case on Monday, trial starts next Monday. You know, like you probably don't know about this witness till Thursday.
And let's compare this to the Trump trial that's going on. This is one of the ones, New York v. Trump. And I mean, the indictment was a year ago, and that was when, you know, the prosecution laid out basically all the facts they were aware of, identified a bunch of the witnesses. You know, we can kind of look at that as a benchmark for a high profile. You know, we have a high profile defendant, you know, presumably very competent defense, criminal defense team. And it's been, you know, a year since from indictment to trial. So the idea that you would step in a week before and start introducing new witnesses.
That's what I like. When I was watching the show, I assumed he was going for that. He wanted to force himself into ineffective assistance of counsel. That was like, he was going for the appeal is what I thought. Like, you know, I had the shot. I mean, yeah. It doesn't make any sense, but like, it made more sense than like, yeah.
If he filed an ineffective assistance of counsel appeal, then Mickey would be able to present, look, he said, I begged him to take more time and he refused. Now,
well, not only
then it becomes, why did you leave it up to him?
Not only could Mickey say that, not only could Mickey say that, he would be waiving the privilege. He'd be waiving attorney-client privilege. Mickey would have to testify about it.
Right. What's funny is these episodes of this show where we're talking about like episodes 4 through 10. So these 6 episodes, when we talk about how to get away with murder in a little bit, all of the same shit happens in one episode.
It is one
and more.
One episode of nonsense, which I'm so excited to talk about.
Okay. All right. I think we hit everything for this episode finally.
I think so. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll wait for part 2 to talk about the enjoyment factor, because I think that's sort of that's like the whole thing. But just the Elliott trial, how do we think we did on the law? And like Mike said, it's better than some we've seen.
It's much better than some that you're gonna watch. And I don't watch a ton of Law and Order. It does seem like standard legal procedural, which I guess is what they're going for. They're trying to be the next Law and Order kind of thing. So that it was fine. It was I enjoyed some parts of it. There's some parts that are clearly just done for the drama of a show where it's, we want to have, this trial is going to go multiple episodes. We need to have some drama going back and forth each time. So one side has to have a win and the other side has to have a win. And I guess just have to watch these shows with that in mind, that, most of them are going to have something like that.
Yeah, it's going to be, sorry, go ahead.
So, I guess the most annoying part is like, there are things that like they were doing correctly. And if the questions had just been in a different order, it would have been fine.
Yeah, on the expert witness for the most part. Well, Mike, do you have a out of 9
I guess
justices?
I'll give it. Let me think about it. I'll give it 5 out of 9. I'll give it 6. Actually, I don't think anything was like that egregious that like it couldn't have happened. Like, it's not like they're not saying like, oh yes, oh God, what's the line from the blue slime is like, they can't try a husband and wife for the same crime. Arrested Development. There's nothing like that.
I'm familiar with the meme. Yeah. Okay. I'm leaning 4 or 5 as well. Like, there's some stuff that's good, but there's a lot that I really was bothered by. They addressed voir dire and showed at least some of how it works, but it's not a great representation of it because you've got the stupid poker player texting him while he's addressing the jury. That's something that doesn't happen. We didn't really touch on that, but if you're at counsel's table and your cell phone is out, the judge is going to be on you
for a jury trial. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, no. Yeah, I think I gave episode 1 a 5, and I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna say a 5.
So I'm going back and forth.
And I do.
So
Sorry, I'm
here's
coming down to a 4. A 5 is too high. I can't give it a majority. I can't.
Well,
That's fair.
so that's actually what I was gonna say. So like, I guess one thing we have to do is like, I want to like, we typically try to compare it to like real life, right? Like we're to like how not how well does it do against other similar shows? How well does it do compared to real life? And there's just certain things that just would not happen, could not happen. Again, I do like the fact that they get into the voir dire. We all know why they do it. It's because it's a the whole jury tampering thing's a big aspect of it. But it is interesting to sort of see that part. One thing we didn't bring up is Mickey at one point, like I think it was like episode 3, says like, if you're not ready, you have to fake it till you make it. And that in some ways describes my legal practice when you start your own firm. Like there is you want to what? You got to roll with it. Even if you're not 100% sure what's going on, you got to do it. You got to look confident. You got to go in and just show the world what you're offering. And you want to know what? Like sometimes your legal training just kick in and you just sort of go with it and you are able to get there. And he managed to get there in a very weird way and at the very last second. But he, would the trial have happened that way? No, not at all. But is the verdict correct? Yes, I believe the verdict is 100% correct. Was there a decent showing of like a closing argument? Yeah, I think like his closing argument was a very well done off the cuff based on the kind of crappiness of the prosecutor's closing. I think he did a perfect response, and in a way that I just don't see how you would think that he had done it based on the closing, which is that's the perfect
Do you
closing.
think it would? Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Derek.
Go for it.
I do think it would have been much longer.
Yeah, but they're not going to have.
Right. I mean, in real life, a lot of closings in these cases are 45 minutes long, and they walk through every little aspect of it. I have seen scenarios where they're shorter ones, and this was a very good short one. But yeah, he would have dove much more into some of the aspects of it.
You're also just never going to have a TV show give you a 45-minute closing.
Of course not.
Of course not. Not every
the entire episode.
Right. Not every show.
It's the kind of thing I could see like Aaron Sorkin trying to do is just one episode that's just this defense attorney's closing.
was literally.
We keep interrupting Derrick.
I know.
I was literally about to bring up the West Wing episode of the debate, where it's just one episode of the whole debate.
Oh, sure.
And
there's
a Sorkin thing, and I could see him doing that in a show, like if he ever writes again for like a show where like it's a legal type drama where like one episode is just the closings or something like that. Like I could totally.
There's a BoJack Horseman episode where it's a cartoon, but it's just BoJack giving, speaking at a memorial for his mother, and it's like, here's a half-hour episode of just one character looking at the camera talking. They did a good job with it, but that's like a special show.
Interesting.
Yeah.
BoJack did some very experimental shows. They also did an episode where no one says the word.
I understand.
Mike's adding a very interesting thing to my attempts at coming up with a number of justices. I'm going to agree with Geoff that I don't think this can be a majority. So I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to say it's a 4-4 with one judge who has one judge has recused themselves from this case. So it's a 4-4 split, and it just goes straight back down. Because I think like 4 is unfair, because I do think it's better than what a lot of trials are out there, in movies and TV shows. But there's just a few things that just rub me the wrong way. So I'll go with a 4, a clarified 4.
I feel bad about giving the 6 now. I guess like there are parts of it that I did actually enjoy, and that's what I'm stuck on. And then and then there's parts that were really terrible. I feel like if I had watched episode 2 again, I would be much lower. I did. Episode 2.
We don't have to reach a unified verdict.
Yeah.
No, I think we're okay with it.
Yeah. I'm not going to adjust it right now, but I might after we talk about episode 2, the next episode. Maybe I'll step back and think about it.
Okay.
So everyone, stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about the other issues that came up in season 1 that aren't
B, C, and D plots of this.
Yeah, as it were.
Sorry, I'm about to jump into my thoughts on them right now, but I'm not going to.
Oh my God, Mike! Like, wait, we're talking about. Okay, anyway, Colleen, just.
But why are there dream sequences? What?
Kick Mike's mic up. Mute Mike's mic for the last 10 minutes, and I think this would have gone super smoothly. Anyway, stay tuned for part 2. We will be back. Love you all.
Getting a little punchy here.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2024, all rights reserved.